The morning light filtered through my kitchen window in Columbus, Ohio, casting a golden glow across the old family photograph I was gently dusting. In the frame, my late husband Robert smiled back at me, his arms wrapped around our two young children, Michael, barely 5, and Emily, just 3. Their faces glowed with the innocent joy of a family barbecue from 43 years ago. I traced the glass with my cloth, remembering how Robert had set the timer on his camera, running to join us just as the shutter clicked. Back then, I believed we had captured something eternal: love, unity, the promise that family meant forever. The sharp slam of the front door shattered my reverie like glass hitting concrete. The rapid staccato of high heels against hardwood announced Tracy's arrival before I even saw her. My daughter-in-law swept into the living room, her designer purse swinging from her shoulder, her eyes immediately zeroing in on the photograph in my hands. "That old, dusty thing is making the whole room look dated," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She gestured dismissively at the walls I'd carefully decorated over 5 decades. "This house belongs to us now, Margaret. You should really learn to keep things aesthetically appropriate." Before I could respond, my son Michael appeared behind her, his face cold and calculating in a way that would have broken his father's heart. He looked at the photograph in my hands, then at me, as if weighing the value of both. When he spoke, his words cut through the morning peace like a blade through silk. "Mom, you're old now. What do you really have left except being a burden?" His voice was matter of fact, businesslike, as if he were discussing the weather. Our 6-year-old grandson Danny sat at the kitchen table, eating cereal, well within earshot. "The only thing of any value you still possess is this house. Sooner or later, you're going to have to sign it over to us anyway." The contrast hit me like a physical blow. The laughing children in the photograph versus the cold strangers standing in my living room. Tracy stepped forward and, without warning, snatched the frame from my hands. "These old pictures just collect dust and make everything look shabby," she said, examining it with obvious distaste. Then, with a casual flick of her wrist, she let it drop. The sound of splintering glass exploded through the room. The frame hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crack, and 43 years of preserved memory scattered in sharp, glittering fragments around my feet. The photograph itself lay torn, my husband's smiling face separated from his children by a jagged rip down the middle. I stood frozen, my dusting cloth still in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of Danny's spoon clinking against his cereal bowl and the grandfather clock Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary, ticking steadily in the corner. But as I stared down at the destruction of my most treasured memory, something shifted inside me. Deep in my chest, beneath the pain and shock, a small flame of determination flickered to life. I looked up at Michael and Tracy, who were watching me with obvious satisfaction, waiting to see me crumble. Instead, I knelt slowly among the glass shards, carefully picking up the torn pieces of the photograph. When I stood, there was something different in my eyes, something they hadn't seen before and didn't recognize. "You want my signature?" I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos around my feet. "And you'll get it. But not in the way you think. 47 years ago, I married Robert Lewis in a small ceremony at St. Matthew's Church, wearing my mother's altered wedding dress and carrying daisies from our neighbor's garden. We couldn't afford much, but we had dreams bigger than our tiny apartment above Murphy's hardware store. Robert worked double shifts at the steel mill while I cleaned houses during the day and studied nursing at night. Every penny we saved went toward our goal, a home where we could raise the family we both desperately wanted. When Michael was born, I held him in that cramped hospital room and whispered promises into his tiny ear. I promised him stability, love, and a mother who would never abandon him, the way mine had abandoned me. 2 years later, when Emily arrived with her father's gentle eyes and stubborn chin, I made the same vow. I would be the mother I'd always needed, present, protective, and unwavering in my devotion. For 23 years, I worked as a community nurse, driving through Columbus's roughest neighborhoods to care for elderly patients who had no one else. I changed bedpans, administered medications, and held the hands of dying strangers because I understood what it meant to feel forgotten. Every night, I came home exhausted but fulfilled, knowing I'd made a difference in someone's life. Robert would have dinner waiting. He was a better cook than me anyway, and we'd sit with our children, asking about school, homework, friends. We saved every dollar we could spare. No vacations to Disney World like other families. No new cars or expensive clothes. Instead, we put down roots. In 1987, we bought this modest 3-bedroom house on Maple Street with a small yard where Robert planted tomatoes and I grew roses. The mortgage felt enormous then. $485 a month seemed impossible on our combined income. But we did it. For 18 years, we never missed a payment. I watched my children grow in these rooms. Michael took his first steps on this very hardwood floor, the same floor where Tracy would later destroy our family photo. Emily practiced piano on the old upright we bought secondhand, filling the house with music until her teenage years when silence became her preferred language. I nursed them through chickenpox, celebrated graduations, hosted birthday parties where neighborhood kids tracked mud through my clean kitchen. When Robert was diagnosed with lung cancer at 64, I became his caregiver, too. For 2 years, I watched the strongest man I'd ever known slowly fade away. I administered his morphine, helped him to the bathroom, held him when the pain became unbearable. Michael visited sporadically, always busy with work, he said. Emily came more often, but she lived 3 states away with her teaching job. The day Robert died, I held his hand and promised him I would protect everything we'd built together. The house was finally ours, mortgage paid off just 6 months before his diagnosis. "Take care of our home," he whispered near the end. It's proof we mattered. For 3 years since his death, I'd kept that promise. I maintained the house meticulously, tended Robert's garden, and tried to stay connected to my children, despite the growing distance I felt between us. When Michael's business started failing last year, I offered help. When Tracy mentioned how cramped their apartment felt, I welcomed them to move in temporarily. I thought I was doing what mothers do, providing shelter, offering support, keeping the family together. I never imagined that my generosity would become a weapon they'd use against me, or that the signature I'd use to build our life would become the tool they'd try to use to destroy it. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after Michael and Tracy moved in. I found them huddled over paperwork at my kitchen table, their voices dropping to whispers the moment I entered the room. Tracy quickly slid a manila folder under her placemat, but not before I caught a glimpse of official-looking documents with the bank's letterhead. Just some business papers, Michael said when I asked, his smile too bright, too forced. Nothing you need to worry about, Mom. But I did worry. That afternoon, while they were out, I found myself drawn to the folder Tracy had left on the counter. Inside were documents I didn't understand, something about loan restructuring and asset evaluation. My house was listed as collateral for something, though I'd never signed any loan papers. When I asked Michael about it that evening, he waved me off with practiced ease. "You're getting confused, Mom. You probably forgot you signed those papers. It happens at your age." The way he said your age made it sound like a disease. The incident started small. Tracy would rearrange my furniture while I was at my weekly doctor's appointment, claiming she was updating the decor. When I protested that I liked my mother's china cabinet where it was, she laughed. "Margaret, you can't seriously prefer that outdated arrangement. Trust me, I have an eye for these things." Then came the flowers. I'd planted marigolds along the front walkway, Robert's favorite, and tended them carefully through the spring. One morning, I woke to find them all gone, replaced with what Tracy called more sophisticated landscaping. When I asked what happened to my flowers, she shrugged. "They were blocking the driveway. We need the space for our cars." But it was the way they spoke to me that cut the deepest. During dinner, they'd discuss plans for the house as if I weren't sitting right there. "We should knock out this wall," Tracy would say, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Open up the space." Michael would nod enthusiastically. "Great idea. We'll get estimates next week." "This is still my house," I reminded them once, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course it is, Mom," Michael replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. "We're just trying to help you maintain it properly. You can't handle all this responsibility alone anymore." The mail started disappearing. Bills that should have come to me were suddenly arriving in Michael's name. When I questioned this, he explained that he'd set up mail forwarding to make things easier for me. "You don't need to stress about paperwork, Mom. I'll handle all the adult responsibilities." Adult responsibilities. As if my 70 years of managing a household, raising children, and maintaining a career meant nothing. The breaking point came when I tried to access my own bank account and found it had been frozen pending family financial consultation. The teller, a young woman who couldn't have been older than Emily, looked at me with pity as she explained that my account showed irregular activity, and family members had requested oversight. "I don't understand," I said, my hands shaking as I held my driver's license and bank card. "This is my account. I've been banking here for 40 years. I'm sorry, Mrs. Lewis, but your son provided documentation showing power of attorney for financial decisions. You'll need to speak with him about any transactions." That night, I confronted Michael and Tracy. They were in the living room, Tracy scrolling through real estate listings on her laptop, while Michael calculated something on a calculator. "I want to know what you've done to my bank account," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Michael looked up with that patronizing expression I'd grown to hate. "Mom, we've talked about this. You're getting forgetful. Last month, you almost paid the electric bill twice. We're just protecting you from making financial mistakes. I never gave you power of attorney." Tracy and Michael exchanged a look. Quick, but I caught it. "You signed the papers, Mom," he said gently. "Remember? When you were feeling overwhelmed after Dad's anniversary? You said you wanted us to help with the complex stuff. I didn't remember signing anything like that, but the way they looked at me with such certainty, such documentation to back their claims, made me question my own memory. Was I becoming forgetful? Had I really signed papers I couldn't recall? Standing in my own living room, surrounded by the life Robert and I had built, I felt like a stranger in my own home, and deep down, a terrible suspicion began to take root that this confusion wasn't accidental. The psychological warfare escalated with surgical precision. Every morning, I woke up to find small changes that made me question my own reality. My reading glasses would be moved from the nightstand to the kitchen counter. The thermostat would be adjusted, leaving me shivering in rooms that had suddenly become freezing. When I mentioned these things, Tracy would tilt her head with exaggerated concern. Margaret, you must have moved them yourself. You probably just forgot. She'd exchanged that look with Michael again, the one that said, "See? She's losing it." The dinner table became a battlefield disguised as family time. They'd serve smaller portions on my plate while heaping food onto their own. When I asked for more, Tracy would pat my hand condescendingly. "You don't want to overeat at your age. It's harder on your digestion." If I protested, Michael would sigh heavily, as if dealing with a difficult child. "Mom, we're just looking out for your health. You should be grateful we care enough to monitor these things." Grateful. The word stung like salt in an open wound. The lock on the back door was changed without warning. I discovered this when I tried to water Robert's tomato plants and found myself locked out of my own yard. When I called Michael from the neighbor's phone, he acted surprised. "Oh, that's right. Tracy had it changed for security reasons." "Don't worry, Mom. Just call us whenever you need to go outside. We'll let you out." Let me out of my own house, my own yard. The mail situation grew worse. Official letters started arriving, addressed to Michael Lewis at my address. Bank statements, insurance documents, property tax assessments, all in his name, as if he already owned everything. When I confronted him, he had explanations ready. "I had to add my name to handle your affairs, Mom. It's temporary, just until you're feeling more capable." He'd produce papers I supposedly signed, pointing to signatures that looked like mine, but felt foreign when I examined them closely. The breaking point came during what they called a family meeting. Tracy had invited her sister Karen to witness, along with our neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, under the guise of community support. They sat in my living room, with clipboards and serious expressions. "Margaret," Tracy began, her voice dripping with false compassion, "we need to discuss your living situation. We've been tracking some concerning behaviors." She pulled out a tablet and began reading from what she called her documentation log. According to her records, I'd left the stove on 3 times. I hadn't. Forgotten to take my medication multiple times. I had a pill organizer and took them religiously, and showed signs of increasing confusion and agitation. "Last week, you accused me of moving your glasses," she continued, "when you clearly moved them yourself. You've been paranoid about the mail, even though Michael explained the practical reasons for the changes. And yesterday, you insisted the locks were different, which is obviously impossible since you live here." Mrs. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Karen nodded along, occasionally making notes. Michael sat with his arms crossed, the picture of a concerned son dealing with a declining parent. "The truth is," Tracy said, setting down her tablet with finality, You need more care than we can provide while maintaining our own lives. We found a lovely memory care facility. I don't have memory problems, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. The room fell silent. Tracy made a note on her tablet. Denial and agitation, she murmured. Classic symptoms. That's when I realized the full scope of their plan. They weren't just trying to take my house. They were systematically destroying my credibility, creating a paper trail of incompetence that would justify whatever they did next. Every confused moment they'd manufactured, every small change they'd made to my routine, every signature they claimed I'd forgotten, it was all building toward this moment. I want everyone out of my house, I said quietly. Michael stood up, his mask finally slipping. This isn't your house anymore, Mom. Check the deed, check the bank records, check the reality of your situation. His voice was cold, businesslike. We've been patient, but patience has limits. You're going to sign the rest of the papers tomorrow. Or we'll have you declared incompetent and do this the hard way. As our neighbors filed out, avoiding my eyes, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the shattered pieces of my life. But somewhere in the darkness, I remembered something important. I still had my signature. And unlike them, when I used it, it would be the truth. The discovery came by accident, the way truth often reveals itself when people grow careless with their lies. I was looking for aspirin in Michael's jacket pocket. He'd left it hanging on my kitchen chair after complaining of a headache, when my fingers found a USB drive tucked deep in the inner pocket. Something about its deliberate hiding place made my stomach clench. I'd spent months questioning my own sanity, wondering if I really was becoming forgetful, if I truly had signed papers I couldn't remember. But this small device felt like evidence of something darker. I waited until they left for Tracy's sister's birthday dinner, an event I was suddenly too tired to attend. With trembling hands, I inserted the drive into the old computer Robert had bought me for email. What I found made my blood run cold. Folder after folder of forged documents. My signature, scanned and digitally placed on papers I'd never seen. Bank forms authorizing Michael as power of attorney. Loan applications using my house as collateral. Even a falsified medical assessment claiming I showed early signs of cognitive decline, supposedly signed by Dr. Peterson, my physician of 20 years. But the worst discovery was a series of emails between Michael and Tracy, planning their strategy with the cold precision of corporate executives dismantling a competitor. The old bat is more stubborn than we thought, Tracy had written, but the dementia angle is working. Karen bought it completely, and Mrs. Rodriguez seemed convinced. Keep documenting every time she seems confused. We can use it all in court. Michael's response was worse. Insurance appraisal came in at $340,000. Once we get her declared incompetent, we can sell and clear all our debts. The nursing home will only cost about $60,000 a year. Even if she lives another decade, we'll still come out ahead. Another decade. They'd calculated how long I might live and factored it into their profit margins. I scrolled through months of correspondence, watching them plan my destruction with the same care they'd once used to plan family vacations. They'd researched guardianship laws, found the most expensive nursing home they could, one that would quickly drain any remaining assets, and even picked out the real estate agent they'd use to sell my house. The final email, sent just 3 days ago, contained the most devastating revelation. Found the original will, Michael had written. Dad left everything to Mom, like we knew. But once she's declared incompetent, I can contest it based on his declining mental state those last few months. Already talked to a lawyer. We can argue he wasn't competent to make financial decisions while on pain medication. The house should have gone to us anyway. They were planning to destroy not just me, but Robert's memory too. The man who'd worked himself to death to pay off this house, who'd whispered his final wishes about protecting our home. They were going to claim he wasn't mentally capable of making those decisions. I printed everything, every forged signature, every calculated email, every piece of evidence that proved my sanity and their betrayal. My hand shook as the pages emerged from the printer, but my mind had never been clearer. When they returned from dinner, I was waiting in the living room with the evidence spread across the coffee table like playing cards. The USB drive sat in the center, next to a printout of their email calculating my life expectancy. Tracy saw it first. Her face went white, then red, then white again. Margaret, you had no right to go through our private. I held up the forged power of attorney document. This has my name on it, my signature, my house as collateral. How is that private? Michael stepped forward, his jaw tight. You're taking things out of context, Mom. Those emails where you calculated how much money you'd make from my death? I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. Where you planned to destroy your father's final wishes. Where you called me an old bat and celebrated that your dementia story was working. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Tracy attempted damage control. Margaret, you're clearly upset, but you need to understand. We were just trying to protect you from financial decisions you might regret later. I picked up another email printout and read aloud. The old woman is more stubborn than we thought, but the dementia angle is working. Tell me, Tracy, how exactly is calling me an old woman protecting me? Michael's mask finally slipped completely. Fine. You want the truth? You're a burden, Mom. A 70-year-old woman living alone in a house worth more than you'll ever need, while your son's family struggles with debt. We tried to do this the easy way. The easy way. My voice was deadly quiet. Forgery is the easy way. Gaslighting me into thinking I was losing my mind is the easy way. You don't understand the pressure we're under. Tracy's voice cracked. The business is failing. We have Danny's private school tuition, the mortgage on our condo. So you decided to steal from me. It's not stealing, Michael exploded. This house should have been mine anyway. Dad was pumped full of drugs when he made that will. We could have contested it, but we tried to be decent about it. Decent? I repeated the word slowly, tasting its bitter irony. Forging my signature is decent. Planning to declare me incompetent is decent. Calculating how much money you'll make when I die is decent. I walked to the mantelpiece and picked up the one photo that had survived Tracy's redecorating. A small image of Robert and me on our wedding day. Your father would be ashamed of you. Don't you dare! Michael started toward me, his face flushed with rage. What? Tell the truth? I held up the printouts again. This is all going to the police tomorrow. The bank, your lawyer friend who helped you forge my signature. Everyone. You can't prove anything, Tracy said, but her voice shook. I smiled for the first time in months. I don't have to prove anything. You've done that for me. Every email, every forged document, every lie you've told is right here in black and white. That's when I pulled out the papers I'd prepared that afternoon. The real papers, with my real signature, made of my own free will. You wanted my signature so badly, I said, placing them on the table. Well, here it is. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I'd always kept important papers and pulled out the manila envelope I'd prepared that afternoon. My hands were steady now, my voice clear and strong as I returned to face them. You see, I said, settling back into my chair with the envelope in my lap, while you two were celebrating Karen's birthday and congratulating yourselves on how well your plan was working, I was having a very interesting conversation with some professionals. Tracy and Michael exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their expressions for the first time. First, I called the bank. I pulled out a letter with official letterhead. Turns out they were very interested to learn that someone had been forging my signature on loan documents. They've frozen all accounts associated with this address, pending a fraud investigation. Michael's face went ashen. Mom, you don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. I pulled out another document. Then I called my real doctor. Doctor Peterson, who you claimed had diagnosed me with cognitive decline. He was quite surprised to learn he'd supposedly written a report he'd never actually written. He's already submitted a statement to the authorities, confirming that I've never shown any signs of dementia or cognitive impairment. Tracy sank into the couch, her designer composure finally cracking. But the most interesting conversation, I continued, was with Sarah Martinez at Elder Law Associates. Did you know that financial elder abuse is a federal crime? And that forging documents to steal someone's property carries a potential sentence of up to 20 years? I spread the new papers across the coffee table with deliberate precision. Sarah helped me prepare these documents this afternoon. All legitimate, all signed by me in full possession of my faculties, all witnessed by a notary public. The first document was a new will, revoking any previous versions. This ensures that my house and all my assets will go to Emily and my grandson Danny. You're not mentioned. The second was a restraining order. This legally prohibits you from entering my property or contacting me directly. The third was a power of attorney designation. This names Emily as my agent for any future medical or financial decisions. Again, you're not involved. And the final document was the one that would hurt them most. This is a formal complaint to the district attorney's office, documenting every instance of fraud, forgery, and financial elder abuse, along with all the evidence from your USB drive. Michael lurched forward. You can't do this. We're family. We were trying to help. Help? I stood up, and for the first time in months, I felt every inch of my full height. You calculated my life expectancy to determine your profit margin. You forged my signature dozens of times. You convinced me I was losing my mind while you systematically stole everything my husband and I built together. Tell me, Michael, what part of that was helping? The house is worth nothing if you can't maintain it, Tracy shrieked, all pretense of concern finally gone. You're one fall away from a broken hip, one medical emergency from bankruptcy. We would have taken care of everything. The way you took care of your business finances? The way you took care of your own debt? I shook my head. You don't take care of things, Tracy. You consume them. I walked to the window and looked out at Robert's garden, where the tomatoes were beginning to ripen. Your father and I spent 47 years building this life. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every moment of love that happened in these rooms, we earned it. And you thought you could just take it because I'm old, because I'm alone, because you thought I'd be too weak or too confused to fight back. Michael made one last desperate attempt. Mom, think about Danny. If you do this, you'll destroy his family. He'll grow up knowing his father is in prison because of his grandmother. The manipulation was so transparent, so calculated, that I almost laughed. Danny will grow up knowing that actions have consequences, that stealing is wrong, even when you steal from family, especially when you steal from family. I picked up the phone. You have 1 hour to pack your belongings and leave my house. If you're still here when Officer Martinez arrives, yes, I called the police too. You'll be arrested for trespassing in addition to everything else. You can't throw us out. Tracy stood up, her face twisted with rage. We have rights. We've been living here for months. As guests, I corrected. Guests who have worn out their welcome by committing multiple felonies under my roof. Michael grabbed Tracy's arm. Come on, we'll fight this in court. She can't prove. I can prove everything, I said quietly. Every forged signature, every illegal transaction, every lie you told to cover your tracks. You documented it all yourselves. Sarah says it's the most clear-cut case of elder abuse she's ever seen. As they headed toward the stairs to pack, I called after them. And Michael, your father's will was perfectly legal. He was lucid until the day he died, and 3 witnesses can testify to that fact. Sarah already checked. The sound of their footsteps on the stairs felt like the first rain after a long drought. I walked to the broken picture frame still lying on the floor where Tracy had dropped it, carefully picking up the torn photograph of Robert and our young children. I kept my promise, I whispered to Robert's image. I protected our home. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Strong, clear, free. The next morning, I stood in my kitchen making coffee for one, savoring the silence that had replaced months of tension. Sunlight streamed through clean windows. I'd spent the evening before scrubbing away the film of anxiety that had coated everything in my house. The police had come and gone, taking statements and copies of all the evidence. Officer Martinez, a kind woman about Emily's age, had assured me that the DA's office would pursue charges aggressively. Cases like this are more common than you'd think, she'd said, carefully bagging the USB drive. But rarely do we get this much documentation. They basically created a confession letter for every crime they committed. Emily arrived at noon, her face puffy from crying during the 3-hour drive from Cincinnati. She threw her arms around me the moment I opened the door, holding on like she was afraid I might disappear. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you. You couldn't have known, I said, leading her to the kitchen table where the evidence was still spread out. They were very careful to make me look confused and unreliable. And they kept you at a distance deliberately. Emily read through the emails with growing horror. God, Mom! Old bat? Life expectancy calculations? How could Michael say these things about you? Because somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. I poured her a cup of coffee, extra cream the way she'd always liked it. But that's his failure, not mine. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Sarah Martinez, my lawyer, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who enjoys justice. "Mrs. Lewis," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "I have excellent news. The bank has agreed to reverse all unauthorized transactions and remove Michael's name from your accounts. They're also conducting their own internal investigation into how the forged documents were processed." She settled at the kitchen table and pulled out a stack of papers. "Additionally, I've filed a civil suit to recover the money they stole from your accounts, approximately $47,000 according to the bank records. We should be able to recoup most of it, plus damages." "What about criminal charges?" Emily asked. "The DA is pursuing multiple felony counts: forgery, identity theft, financial elder abuse, and fraud. Given the extensive evidence, they're looking at significant prison time if convicted." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "However, you should know that Michael's lawyer contacted me this morning. They want to negotiate a plea deal." I considered this while sipping my coffee. "What kind of plea deal?" "Full restitution of stolen funds, plus damages. Michael would plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for a reduced sentence, probably 2 to 3 years instead of the potential 20. Tracy would receive probation and community service, since she wasn't the primary perpetrator. And if I refuse the plea deal, we go to trial. It could take years, and there's always some risk with juries, though this case is about as solid as they come." I looked out the window at Robert's garden, thinking about what he would want. Robert had always believed in consequences, but he'd also believed in mercy. "What do you recommend?" "Honestly, take the plea. You get your money back, they face real consequences for their actions, and you can move on with your life without years of court battles." Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. "It's your decision, Mom." That afternoon, we drove to the nursing home Michael and Tracy had selected for me. Sunset Manor, the expensive facility that would have drained my assets within a few years. I wanted to see what they'd planned for my future. The administrator, Mr. Hutchins, greeted us with the practiced sympathy of someone accustomed to dealing with difficult family situations. "Mrs. Lewis, we weren't expecting you today. Your son said you were, well, that the transition might be challenging for you." "The transition isn't happening," I said calmly. "I'm here to understand what my son told you about my condition." Mr. Hutchins looked confused, shuffling through a file folder. "Well, he indicated advanced dementia requiring full-time care. He'd already submitted medical documentation and put down a substantial deposit for our memory care unit. May I see that medical documentation?" The forms he showed me were more of Michael's forgeries. Fake assessments, claiming I couldn't manage basic daily tasks, couldn't handle finances, and posed a danger to myself if left alone. Dr. Peterson's signature had been copied onto documents he'd never written. "Mr. Hutchins," I said, "I'm going to save us both some trouble. My son committed fraud to try to have me placed here against my will. The police are investigating, and those medical documents are falsified. I suggest you contact your legal department." As we drove home, we drove. Emily was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Mom, would you consider moving closer to me? I have that extra bedroom, and after everything that's happened, honey, I appreciate the offer, but this is my home. Your father and I built our life here. I'm not going to let fear chase me away from everything we worked for." I patted her knee. "Besides, I'm stronger than I thought." These last few months proved that. That evening, Emily helped me change the locks again. This time, I kept all the keys. We hung new photos to replace the ones Tracy had removed, and I planted new marigolds where she destroyed Robert's flowers. You know what the best part is? I said as we watered the new plants together. What's that? I finally understand the difference between being alone and being lonely. I was lonely when they were here, even surrounded by family. Now that I'm alone again, I'm not lonely at all. As the sun set over my garden, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. And tomorrow, I would wake up in my own house, make my own decisions, and live my own life, just the way Robert and I had always intended. 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen preparing Sunday dinner for 6 people, a number that would have been impossible when Michael and Tracy lived here, not because of space, but because of the toxic atmosphere they'd created. Now my home buzzed with genuine warmth and laughter. Emily had driven up from Cincinnati with her boyfriend James, a soft-spoken teacher who helped me install new bird feeders in Robert's garden. Mrs. Rodriguez had become a regular dinner guest after apologizing profusely for believing Tracy's manipulation. "I should have trusted my instincts," she'd said. "Something always felt wrong about how they spoke to you." The biggest surprise was Danny. During the divorce proceedings, yes, Tracy had filed for divorce the moment Michael was sentenced to 18 months in minimum security prison. My grandson had asked to spend weekends with me. "Grandma," he'd said during our first unsupervised visit, "I knew Mom and Dad were being mean to you. I wanted to tell someone, but I didn't know who would believe me." That conversation had broken my heart and healed it simultaneously. At 6 years old, he'd recognized the wrongness of what was happening, but felt powerless to stop it. Now, at 7, he helped me tend to the garden and listened to stories about his grandfather with the hunger of a child learning his own history. The final 2 dinner guests were unexpected gifts from my newfound freedom. Margaret Chen, a retired teacher from down the street, had knocked on my door one morning after hearing about my situation through the neighborhood grapevine. "I went through something similar with my own son," she'd said over coffee. "Not fraud, but the assumption that getting older means getting stupid. Would you like to join my book club? We could use someone who understands that experience doesn't make you irrelevant." Through Margaret's book club, I'd met Dorothy Washington, a 75-year-old former social worker who'd become my closest friend. Dorothy had looked at my story and said, "Honey, you survived something that breaks a lot of people. Have you considered helping others who are going through the same thing?" That suggestion had led to the most fulfilling work of my life. With Sarah Martinez's help, I'd established the Robert Lewis Foundation for Elder Protection, using the civil settlement money from Michael and Tracy as seed funding. We provided legal assistance, counseling, and support groups for elderly people experiencing financial abuse from family members. The hardest part, I often told new clients, isn't the money they steal. It's the way they make you doubt yourself. But your instincts were right. You're not crazy, you're not incompetent, and you deserve better. The foundation operated out of my living room 3 days a week. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, support groups met around my kitchen table. Fridays were for legal consultations with volunteer attorneys. I'd never imagined that my worst experience could become my greatest purpose. The plea deal had worked exactly as Sarah predicted. Michael served his sentence and was released on probation with the requirement that he have no contact with me. Tracy moved back to her parents' house in Florida with Danny, though she allowed him to visit me every other weekend. The stolen money had been repaid with interest, and my house was completely secure in my name. But the real healing came from smaller moments. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market with Dorothy, where vendors saved the best tomatoes for the ladies who run that foundation for families. Reading bedtime stories to Danny over video calls when he was in Florida, teaching Emily to make Robert's famous chili recipe, the one I'd never shared because she'd never asked before. "You seem different, Mom," Emily said as we prepared dinner together. "Stronger, more, yourself." "I am myself," I replied, stirring the chili. "For the first time in years, I'm exactly who I want to be." The doorbell rang, and Danny burst through the door carrying a school project, a poster titled "My Hero," with my picture in the center, surrounded by words like brave, smart, and strong. "I wrote about you, Grandma," he announced proudly. "I told my class about how you caught the bad guys who were trying to steal from you, even though they were your own family." Mrs. Rodriguez wiped her eyes as Danny hung his poster on my refrigerator. "That boy's got good instincts," she whispered, just like his grandmother. As we sat down to dinner, I looked around the table at these people who'd become my chosen family. Margaret Chen was explaining her latest book club selection to James, who listened with genuine interest. Dorothy was teaching Danny a card game, their laughter filling the room. Emily caught my eye and smiled, the worry lines that had creased her face for months finally gone. "Robert," I whispered silently to my husband's empty chair, "look what we built. Not just the house, the life, the love, the strength to protect what matters." For dessert, I served apple pie made from Robert's tree in the backyard. As Dorothy helped me clear the dishes, she said quietly, "You know, Margaret, I've worked with abuse survivors for 40 years. Most of them spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, waiting for the next betrayal. But you've done something remarkable. You've transformed your experience into power." "How do you mean?" "You didn't just survive what they did to you. You used it to build something beautiful. That foundation, this dinner table, the way you've reclaimed your life. It's extraordinary." That night, after everyone had gone home and I was alone in my house for the first time in months, I didn't feel lonely. I felt complete. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. I picked up the phone and called the crisis hotline, where I volunteered 2 evenings a week. "This is Margaret," I told the coordinator. "I know it's last minute, but could you use an extra volunteer tonight? I'm feeling especially grateful, and I'd like to share that with someone who might need it." As I drove to the crisis center, I realized that Michael and Tracy had given me an unexpected gift. By trying to break me, they'd shown me exactly how strong I really was. And that strength wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every person I could help, every elder who needed to know they weren't alone, every family member who could learn the difference between care and control. My signature, the one they'd forged so many times to steal from me, was now being used to sign checks for legal aid, to authorize support services, and to create safety for people who thought they had nowhere to turn. In the end, they'd wanted my signature to take everything away from me. Instead, I was using it to give everything back to myself, to others, and to the memory of a man who taught me that home isn't just a building you own, but a life you're brave enough to protect. 1 year later, I sat in the mahogany paneled conference room of elder law associates, surrounded by legal documents that would secure my legacy for generations to come. But unlike the forged papers Michael and Tracy had used to try to steal my life, these documents represented my true wishes, signed freely and witnessed properly. Sarah Martinez spread the final trust documents across the polished table. With this structure, the house will remain in the family through Emily and Danny, but a portion of its value will continue funding the foundation in perpetuity. Even after you're gone, Margaret, your work will continue. I picked up my pen, the same Mont Blanc that Robert had given me for our 25th anniversary, the one I'd used to sign our mortgage papers, our wills, and every important document of our marriage. Now it would sign papers ensuring that my experience would protect others for decades to come. The irony isn't lost on me, I said to Emily, who sat beside me as trustee and successor. They wanted my signature so desperately to take everything away. Now I'm using it to give everything away, but on my terms, to people who deserve it. The Robert Lewis Foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. What started in my living room now operated from a small office downtown, with 3 paid staff members and dozens of volunteers. We'd helped over 200 families in the past year, preventing millions of dollars in elder fraud and abuse. But the real victory wasn't measured in dollars saved or cases won. It was measured in phone calls like the one I'd received that morning from Mrs. Patterson, a 78-year-old widow whose nephew had been pressuring her to sign over her pension. "Margaret," she'd said, her voice strong and clear, "I used what you taught me." I told him no, I got everything in writing, and I called the police when he tried to forge my signature. He's in jail now, and I'm free. For the first time in 2 years, I'm not afraid in my own home. That call had come while I was tending Robert's garden, now expanded to include a memorial section where clients and volunteers had planted flowers in honor of loved ones they'd lost to elder abuse. The garden had become a place of healing where support group members often gathered to share their stories under the shade of the old oak tree Robert had planted 40 years ago. Emily appeared at my shoulder as I signed the final trust document. "Dad would be so proud of you, Mom. Not just for protecting the house, but for what you've built from the experience." "He is proud," I said, feeling Robert's presence as strongly as if he were sitting beside me. I talk to him every morning in the garden. He tells me to keep using my voice, to keep fighting for people who think they don't have any fight left. The document's complete. Sarah walked us to the elevator. "You know, Margaret, in 30 years of elder law, I've never seen anyone transform a victimization into such a powerful force for good. You've literally changed the legal landscape in this county." Judges reference the Lewis Foundation protocols, and other cities are copying your model. As we stepped into the bright afternoon sunshine, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been questioning my own sanity, wondering if I really was the confused, burdensome old woman my son and daughter-in-law had painted me to be. Today, I was walking out of a lawyer's office having just signed documents that would protect vulnerable elders for generations. The difference wasn't just in my circumstances, it was in my understanding of my own worth. "Emily," I said as we reached my car, "do you remember what you asked me last year?" About moving closer to you, leaving this house? She nodded. I was scared for you. I thought you'd be safer with me. I understand why you thought that. But the thing is, honey, running away from the place where bad things happened doesn't heal you. Standing your ground, reclaiming your space, turning your wounds into wisdom, that's what heals you. We drove through the neighborhood where I'd lived for 37 years, past houses where I now knew 3 other elder abuse survivors lived. Women who'd found the courage to speak up after learning about the foundation. Past the bank where I'd once been told I couldn't access my own money, and where I now served on the advisory board for Elder Financial Protection. At home, I found a package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a hand-carved picture frame made by Danny in his woodworking class, along with a note. For the new family picture you promised to take, Grandma. The one where everyone is happy. I thought about that broken frame from a year ago. The shattered image of my young family that Tracy had destroyed so carelessly. At the time, it had felt like the destruction of everything beautiful from my past. Now I understood it differently. Some things need to break before they can be rebuilt stronger. That evening, as I prepared for my weekly radio interview, the local station had given me a monthly slot to discuss elder rights. I arranged the new frame on my mantelpiece next to Robert's photo. Tomorrow, Emily and Danny would come for Sunday dinner, and we'd fill it with a picture of our family as we truly were. Smaller than before, but infinitely more authentic. You know what the most important thing is? I said, into the recording device, practicing for my radio segment. It's not that bad people get punished, though that's important. It's not even that stolen money gets returned, though that helps. The most important thing is that you remember who you are underneath all their lies about who you should be. I paused, thinking about the woman I'd been a year ago, frightened, confused, doubting my own memories and instincts. They tried to convince me I was losing my mind, that I was a burden, that my opinions and wishes didn't matter because of my age. But here's what I learned. Your worth isn't determined by how young you are, how much money you have, or how convenient you are for other people. Your worth is inherent, unchangeable, and non-negotiable. The phone rang. Probably another client needing support, another family facing the betrayal I'd survived. I answered it gladly, ready to share what I'd learned. That strength isn't about never falling down. It's about deciding to stand back up, dust yourself off, and build something beautiful from the pieces. Robert Lewis Foundation, this is Margaret. How can I help you reclaim your power today? As I finish telling you this story, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where Tracy once destroyed our family photograph, where Michael calculated my worth in terms of real estate value, where I nearly lost everything I'd spent a lifetime building. But now, this kitchen serves 20 families a week through our support group meetings. The table where they spread forged documents now hosts legal clinics where real attorneys help real people protect themselves from the predators in their own families. The truth is, my story isn't unique. Right now, somewhere in your neighborhood, an elderly person is being convinced they're losing their mind, while someone they trust steals everything they own. Someone's grandmother is being told she's too old to manage her own affairs, while her children forge her signature on papers that will leave her homeless. Someone's father is being isolated from friends and family, while his finances are drained by people who call it help. Financial elder abuse affects 1 in 10 seniors. but fewer than 1 in 24 cases gets reported. Why? Because the victims are ashamed. Because they're afraid no one will believe them. Because the abusers are often their own children, and they'd rather suffer in silence than see their family destroyed. But silence protects the wrong people. If my story sounds familiar, if you've watched someone you love suddenly become confused about money they've managed successfully for decades, if you've seen family members pushing for quick decisions about property or care, if you've noticed someone's mail or phone calls being monitored, trust your instincts. You're not imagining things. You're not being paranoid. You're seeing abuse, and that person needs your help. Here's what you can do. First, listen. When an older person tells you something doesn't feel right, believe them. Don't dismiss their concerns because they're getting old or because family members say they're confused. Second, document everything. Financial abuse leaves a paper trail. Unusual banking activity, sudden changes to wills or deeds, new names on accounts. Third, get professional help. Elder law attorneys, adult protective services, and organizations like mine exist because this problem is real and widespread. If you're the one being targeted, remember this. Being old doesn't make you stupid. Being dependent doesn't make you powerless. Being afraid doesn't make you wrong. Your signature is yours to give or withhold. Your home is yours to keep or sell. Your money is yours to spend or save. No one, not your children, not your caregivers, not anyone, has the right to make those decisions for you just because you've reached a certain age. The Robert Lewis Foundation now operates in 12 cities across 4 states. We've prevented over $8 million in theft, helped prosecute 47 cases of elder fraud, and supported hundreds of families through the trauma of financial abuse by loved ones. But our most important work happens one conversation at a time. When someone finds the courage to say, "This doesn't feel right," and "I deserve better." Every week, I get letters from people who found their voice after hearing my story. Last month, a 90-year-old man in Phoenix used our protocols to discover his nephew was stealing his Social Security checks. A grandmother in Detroit caught her daughter-in-law forging her signature on mortgage papers. A widower in Seattle realized his son's concern about his spending was actually preparation for financial manipulation. They all have one thing in common. They trusted their instincts, they asked for help, and they refused to be victims just because they were over 65. Your age is not a weakness. Your experience is not irrelevant. Your voice matters now just as much as it did when you were 30, 50, or any other age, when people took you seriously. The signature you've been writing for decades doesn't suddenly become meaningless because your hair is gray or your hands shake slightly. I want you to remember Margaret Lewis, not because my story is special, but because it's ordinary. What happened to me happens every day, in every community, to people just like you. And what I did about it, fighting back, seeking help, using my experience to protect others, that's ordinary too. It's what any of us can do when we remember that dignity isn't something other people give us. It's something we claim for ourselves. If you've seen the warning signs, speak up. If you're experiencing financial abuse, get help. If you know someone who needs support, share this story. And if you've survived something similar, consider helping others find their strength the way I found mine. Because in the end, the most powerful thing I learned isn't about money or houses or legal documents. It's this: real family doesn't hide you away. Real family builds a bigger table. And no matter how old you get, you deserve your seat at that table. Your signature has power. Your voice has value. Your life has meaning. Use them all.